VoxDay, VoxDay.net, and unauthorized.tv. Now, as you can see, there has been a crime committed, a perpetration of a dastardly act, as you can see behind me. I'm trying to figure out how to pop out this chat thing. Here we go. Okay. They keep changing this stuff on us. So, all right, so we got the DLive chat up. We have the unauthorized chat rolling. And as I was saying, before I so rudely interrupted myself, as you can see, by these blank shells behind me, a crime has been perpetrated. And we even know who the perpetrator is because I received a message not long ago. And I'm going to show you that message, and I'm sure you're going to be appalled too. It says, VoxDay's bookshelf being held hostage somewhere in the Pacific Northwest. You know, we know who it is. You know, it's the terrorist known as the Big Bear. Exactly. Filthy book thieves. Yeah. The only thing worse than a horse thief is a book thief. So, you know, now I know Owen is a creature of Hollywood. I know he watches a lot of TV. And so, you know, but I watch TV too sometimes. Not very often. I'm a book guy. John says, don't negotiate. It'll only encourage more acts of senseless book terrorism. Oh, we don't negotiate with terrorists. There's no question. But I just want to point something out. And this is something that everyone should know. Okay? You don't fuck with the jingle fucking pom-poms. Okay? We know when you're awake. We know when you're sleeping. We know when you've been bad. We know when you've been good. And you know what these pom-poms are used for? You know, they're used to club men to death with a pom-pom. You know, so just keep that in mind. And I've got another message for this book terrorist. This guy who thinks he's tough. The suspect description: 6'8", sensitive blue eyes, fondness for goats and llamas and cows, has been seen playing the piano, milking cows. But, you know, you don't want to mess. You do not want to mess with the jingle pom-poms. No, I do not mean alleged book thief. Did you not read the message? See, look, we got the sensitive blue eyes right there. We got the sloping that we know who this is. It's not Carlos the Jackal. You know, but we have to look. We know that the Beartarians are involved, and so I've got one message. Yeah, these are the pom-poms of peace. You know, we don't seek violence. You know. We seek an understanding, but I do have a message, and the message is right here. Those are some nice goats you got there. It would be a shame if someone made them into books. So I expect my books to be returned to me with an appropriate apology, an appropriate expression of remorse, and a very solemn promise that this is never, ever going to happen again. So let that be a lesson to that book thief out there in Idaho. On further, on additional acts of terrorism, we also have somebody shooting people in Maine, which I'm sure everybody is completely shocked about, given that Massachusetts is pushing very hard for a gun ban. Um, you know, I think Americans are thoroughly sick of the FBI or whoever is responsible releasing its wind-up toys. You know, it's already coming out that this guy was recently in for treatment. Um, it's already coming in, you know, it's already coming out that I believe that the reason he couldn't own any weapons is because he had some uh, child-related criminal charges. I'm not sure about that one, but it was being mentioned on poll late last night when the news first broke. So anyhow, uh, Sam says the 911 calls describe two Middle Eastern assailants. Who knows? You know, um, it would be fascinating if that was actually the case and they attempted to spin it and blame it on some random nut job that they were planning to use as a wind-up toy. Austin says that was a wild segue. What? The common theme is terror. I would say that's a natural segue. We could have gone right into the whole Gaza situation. Um, Sam says, all I'm saying is that anomalies are plentiful and he is somehow still at large. Oh, yeah, but I mean, all of these things are intrinsically dubious now because of all the nonsense that surrounds the previous mass shootings. And we know that we've known since Operation Northwood that the government is perfectly willing to sacrifice a few civilians, a few kids, a few people in order to help achieve its policies. You know, once those records came out, you could never again say, "Oh, well, that would never happen." And now, is every single incident of uh, somebody going nuts with a gun somewhere an indication that the government's involved? No, of course not. You know, the same thing happens all over the world. In the Asian countries, they usually prefer to use knives and hit schools. You know, madness and evil and tragedy surrounds us in this world. But the one thing we always know is that whatever the media says is the official story isn't true. So something about what they're saying isn't true. What exactly isn't true and how far from the truth the official story is, I don't know. But I'm very, very confident that something is, you know, yeah, and that's the thing that does bother me too, not just with the with everything, you know, with um, you know, with the Gaza attacks, with this shooting in Maine, with this book terrorism taking place in Idaho. I mean, you know, there's all these high definition cameras all over the place. Everybody's got telephones that take very high definition recordings, and yet all we ever see is, this low res blurry stuff. You know, I don't I don't pretend to have any idea what's going on. Anyhow, but enough of that subject. What I actually wanted to talk about before my books mysteriously disappeared, what I actually wanted to talk about was a conversation that I had today with a very nice older gentleman, very well informed by mainstream sources. I would say he makes an effort to understand both sides of the story as reported by the various mainstream outlets, from MSNBC to Fox, And the bad news that I have for all of you is that the official story with regards to Ukraine and Russia still works on normal people. I mean, this gentleman was absolutely 100% convinced to this day that Ukraine is winning, because of the incredible resolve and patriotism of its people, that Russia is losing, that the Russian forces have been taking tremendous, terrible casualties, that Putin is very unpopular because of this, and there's I mean, it was really astonishing to realize that smart people of who have good intentions are still being entirely 100% deceived, and they still believe in the West because of democracy and enlightenment values. Now, this guy was not a Ben Shapiro fan, but some of his the people close to him are. Think about that. The spells that you see through, that I see through, are still working on a lot of people. I mean, it was really kind of astonishing to at my Space Bunny said at one point that my face, she couldn't believe the look on my face when he first started explaining all of this stuff, about what's really happening. And it was amazing. And what the significance of this is that the people in the United States are not even remotely close to being ready for the harsh lesson in reality that they're likely going to be getting very soon. It was kind of interesting because at one point he said, well, why do you believe the Russian propaganda? Why do you believe any of this stuff? And it was really funny because I said, look, the narrative about Putin is totally false. He said, well, how are you so sure that it's false? I said, because it's the same narrative that they bring out every single time that there is someone in opposition to the U.S. I said, they're talking about how the Iranian government is unpopular because it's not democratic. It's on the verge of toppling. Putin, unpopular. His government's on the verge of failing. They've said this about Gaddafi. They've said this about Saddam Hussein. They said it about the Sandinistas. They used to talk like that about the Sandinistas. It's always the same. And I finally pointed out, look, I said, why do you think that the Putin government is so unpopular? Well, because they're just taking so many casualties. I said, so you're saying that Putin's a dictator and that Russia's a one-party state, but that his government is going to fall because they've taken too many casualties in a war. I said, do you have any idea how many casualties the Soviet Union took during World War II? Do you have any idea that the Iranian people suffered 500,000 KIA in the war with Iraq? And at no point did it destabilize the government there. I mean, anytime you hear a war plan being based on the other side giving up and overthrowing its government, you know that it's somebody who hasn't paid any attention to military history, beginning with Sun Tzu. And you also know that there's probably neocons involved because they always talk about that. That's always their end game. Well, and then the government will be overthrown. Well, yeah, if you manage to get in there and overthrow it yourself, like in Ukraine, which was not at war. Swedish Trash Panda heard some Ukrainian bots claiming that Putin had died recently. What's the purpose of these lies? Well, as far as I can tell, the purpose is to confuse and create a fog that prevents people from believing anything that they're told that is the truth. You know, the more lies that you're told, the harder it is to recognize the truth. E.G. Prime says, every Iranian I've met is great and hates the governments. Probably selection bias. Well, first of all, let me point out, I'll just ask you a question. It's not too personal. I don't usually like to ask questions like these, but I think this is relevant. Do you live in Iran? And do you travel often to Iran? If you were talking to an Iranian expat, then they're probably, he says he's in Canada. Right. Okay, so you're in Canada. So every single Iranian that you've met is almost certainly someone who is the descendant of a family that was on the side of the Shah back when the Shah's government was overthrown in 1979 and tens of thousands of his supporters fled the country. He says, yeah, they're all Iranian immigrants. Right. So you're talking to people who literally left the country because they hated the government. Mike Cernovich's in-laws were supporters of the Shah. Yeah, I mean, I knew an Iranian family very well, worked with them, for several decades, and they had to leave because I don't think they would have survived the revolution. So no, Chad says Iranians who leave are either gay or atheists. No, that's not true. In fact, some of them are Christian. I can tell you that for a fact. The main reason that they left was because they supported the pre-revolutionary government, the historical government of the Shah. And so once Khomeini took over and the revolution happened, you had this big diaspora of his supporters who left. And so obviously they hate the Iranian government. They hated the Iranian government before it was in government. And so, um, and of course, as always, the macro is not the micro. Again, look at the facts that you can confirm. What can you confirm? Iran fought a very bloody war for 10 years, took over 1 million casualties, lost an estimated 500,000 dead, and that wasn't enough for the government to collapse. So, if your plan involves the government collapsing and it involves killing less than 500,000 Iranians, it's probably not going to work, is it? I mean, that's what I find so ridiculous about all these things, is that it's geopolitics by wishful thinking. And so, we see the same. We keep seeing this over and over again. We're going to see it with Hamas and Hezbollah. Think about how overconfident the Israelis were back in 2006. And they were understandably overconfident. When they invaded Lebanon in 1982, they walked all over the Lebanese army. They expected to do the same. Got a very unpleasant surprise. Decided, you know what, it's not worth it right now. And of course, that's why the U.S. is putting some pretty serious military resources more or less at Israel's disposal, because they're trying to threaten and posture and keep Hezbollah and Iran out of it. It's pretty obvious why Israel is bombing the Syrian airports. They want to make sure that the Soviet jets don't have any place to, or not Soviet, the Russian jets don't have any place to land. And it's, most people don't really know even the relative size of the populations. For example, what's the Israeli population and what's the Israeli Jewish population? It's 9.5 million and about 7 million, right? Now, how are they going to deal with Iran, which has, closer to what, 50 million? What? Look up the population of Iran. I can't remember if it's like 50 million or 90 million. I want to say 50 million, but that might even be low. Bilbo Swaggins thinks he's being clever and doesn't realize that he's demonstrating his lack of historical knowledge. He says, "What country will be the 110th to unwelcome the merchants?" Well, I can tell you, Bilbo Swaggins, that country will be Yemen. And that was 2 years ago. And since then, the 111th country was Afghanistan. Do try to keep up. It was 90 million, sorry. Sorry, 80, I'm getting 88, 89 million. Okay, so the point is that First of all, the Israelis have never defeated the Persians, ever. The Persians, on the other hand, not only defeated the Israelis, but hauled them off to um, Babylon, or technically it's the Babylonians, and then the Persians came in. But um, anyhow, the point is that the Persians have been a formidable force in the Middle East for literally thousands of years. Not only that, but there's there's more than 10 times the population. Okay? This isn't like Russia versus Ukraine. You know, this is more like Russia versus Hungary. It's not even a contest. Which of course is why there's various threats of this, that, and the other thing with nukes and whatever. I don't take that too seriously. But even if they were used, that's not enough. Israel can take out Tehran, but we're not talking about a small desert country. We're talking about a big mountainous country, right? And so, of course, that's why the U.S. is going to have to go in if that's why it's going to become militarily necessary for somebody to rescue the IDF if Hezbollah and Iran get involved. Now, where the likely surprise is, if this comes to pass, which obviously we all hope it doesn't, is that the U.S. is not anywhere nearly as militarily formidable as it used to be. The whole shock and awe thing that worked in Iraq back in 1991, and 2001, it's not likely to work in 2023 when you're not in the desert. And in a time, the U.S. has been dominant for 70 years, mostly because of its air power, also because of its sea power, but mostly because of its air power. But air power isn't what it once was. Powers that Bear says, for this to happen, Netanyahu will probably need to go. When you mean like to avoid the invasion? What does it helps when you're discussing things if you're not general and don't use pronouns, like for what to happen? For peace to happen or for an invasion to happen? Well, there's a very interesting cartoon, I think, from Stone Toss. Let me see if I can dig this up here. Thought I had it somewhere. Nope. Okay, here we go. So let's fire up ArcTunes. It has two sailors, the captain and the guy at the helm. We're in position. Watch out for missiles from Hamas. And then it turns out it's a U.S. aircraft carrier. It says, and Israel. That's what James Halliday said, false flag incoming. Yeah, I think we have to be prepared for the possibility that there is going to be a false flag and that it's going to be an attack on the U.S. ships that are in the Mediterranean right now. Does that necessarily mean that Israel is going to take that kind of risk and do what they did when they attacked the U.S. Liberty? Honestly, I don't think so. First of all, I don't think it would be necessary. If you're going to do some kind of false flag, it's a lot safer to set the explosions and open the hatches and sink the ship yourself, and try to mock up some kind of missile being fired from the direction of Iran, than to actually take the risk of having Israel do it. Because if they do, there's going to be a lot of, I mean, all the eyes of the world right now are on the Middle East, except of course for, except of course for Joe Biden, who is busy saying that the U.S. is going to go to war with China over the Philippines. So I don't think so. Sam notices something interesting. We just had an attack in Maine. He wonders if this might be some type of remember the Maine word magic. I think it's possible. I mean, we don't, hopefully, none of us really truly understands the way that these esoteric Satanists think. They've got their own religion, they've got their own rules, they've got their own rituals. We'll see. We got a super chat here from Wilson Bear. Thank you, Wilson Bear. Air power is not what it was because the U.S. is weaker or because air defense has improved. It's mostly because air defense has improved a lot. The U.S. is relatively weaker in that its aircraft are no longer significantly superior to Soviet/Russian aircraft. But the biggest reason is that anti-aircraft defenses are all over the place now. What they call man-pads, man-portable anti-aircraft devices, are literally all over the battlefield. That's why you don't see a lot of helicopters and strategic bombing and all that sort of stuff in the Russian-Ukraine war. And also, when you look at the the U.S. use of cruise missiles is one of the reasons we see the U.S. using cruise missiles a lot, because they don't want to take the risk of bombers getting shot down. So the U.S. military could barely fight farmers in Vietnam. Modern armies are too much. Well, that's true. One of the things that Simplicius and the guy who writes, Andre, who writes at Remembrances of the Future, one thing that they continually point out is that the U.S. has absolutely no history with or experience of fighting wars on a industrial scale. It was the arsenal of democracy in World War II. It used to have the industry, but it never actually fought those wars itself. The big battles of World War II for the U.S. were an order or two orders of magnitude smaller than the military actions being fought by Russia and Germany. So, the U.S. just doesn't have the doctrine. It doesn't have the experience. It doesn't even know how to deal in the size of the actions that are taking place in Ukraine right now. The Ukrainian-Russian war right now is bigger than the U.S. could handle by itself. And so, that's why the U.S. plan was always, we'll set some tanks up as a speed bump in the Fulda Gap, and then we'll threaten to drop nukes on them. Okay, but you're not going to win a conventional war that way. There's never any plan to win a conventional war in Europe against the Soviet Union. Didn't exist. Um, yeah, the Wehrmacht bear is right. The U.S. military actions in World War II were relatively small. Um, do any of our nukes even work? Well, that's the big question. I mean, there is plenty of reason to doubt that nukes even work. You know, and you can go read Miles Mathis if you want to see him tearing apart um, both the history of the uh, of the Manhattan Project, um, the uh, the film that's been provided of the various explosions, etc., etc. Um, Felis is right. The carnage wrought by FPV grenade dropping and kamikaze drones is terrible. Yeah, you know, it's interesting. If you look at the science fiction writing and military fantasy and military fiction stuff for the last 50 years, none of it really saw the drone stuff coming. I mean, the closest we got to it was that I can recall is in War Dogs, in the War Dogs Battlesuit Bastards. They do have a few drones, and they do rig one up with a grenade and use it to take out some artillery. But you know that was written relatively recently, and uh, you know people were already there was already some use of drones in that capacity. I think by the time that was written in the war between Armenia and Azerbaijan. But it's really fascinating to see because what drones are now is they're basically a way of delivering grenades a lot farther than you can throw them. And so, uh, you know, it's really interesting to see that nobody saw that coming. Let's see. Swedish Trash Panda says, my intuition says that tech that hasn't been used in multiple decades likely doesn't work. I tend to agree. I tend to agree. Uh, Al Dente said Van Creveld seems fairly unworried about Iranian direct threat to Israel for some reason. Well, I think that he understands that Iran doesn't have any real desire to fight a war right now. And you know he what's the best way to put this? You know, like most older military historians, uh, he's a little bit trapped in his analyses of the past, which I think is why he, you know, he didn't grasp the differences that the technological changes were going to make um, in the Russian-Ukrainian war. I think he had much higher expectations of the NATO-Ukrainian performance than he did. Um, but in fairness, none of the expert economists believed that Russia was going to benefit from the sanctions either. I was one of the very, very few people who said uh, that the sanctions were not going to hurt Russia, that they were going to help it, as they did. Um, Once one party starts making swarming, exploding bots, the enemies will develop them as well. Right, which is why all large-scale wars come down to industrial capacity. This is why I keep trying to tell everyone the U.S. is no longer the preeminent military power in the world. What the U.S. retains is that it still retains the greatest ability to deliver military power anywhere in the world. No one else can deliver it the way that the U.S. can deliver it. But that's not enough to win a war. How many times do you have to see that? You know, um, it did work in Iraq, and that really astonished both the Russians and the Chinese, and they promptly went to work and figured out how to develop asymmetric weapon systems and asymmetric approaches that would allow them to surmount that. And they have. They already have. Um, and so if you look at the way that the massive U.S. industrial capacity was key in winning World War II, it should be obvious that whoever has the most industrial capacity is going to win World War III. I'm hoping in the next 2 weeks to do that analysis, or to present that analysis of the Taiwanese invasion that I've been doing. And one of the remarkable things is that if you use their own results as a preliminary analysis of a larger situation, because this is just an analysis of the invasion scenario. But I don't think I'm giving too much away if I mention that the number of ships and planes that are expected to be lost in a successful defense of Taiwan means that the war would already be lost, because the U.S. would not have the capacity to replace the ships lost in any reasonable time frame, whereas China could replace the ships that it lost probably within, certainly within a year, probably within 6 months. As the Imperial Japanese Navy discovered, even if you've got a fine navy, a well-trained, state-of-the-art navy, it doesn't matter if you can't replace your losses. The Germans discovered that too. Even if you have the finest soldiers in the world, if you can't replace them, you will not win. And so Nebula says it's going to be 7 years burying the dead if this pops off. I'm afraid that might be the case. That's why, I hope and I pray that it doesn't happen. But Clown World seems to be showing its teeth and, making it clear that they do not want to go down easily. Dan and Georgia said, once we reached the Japan home islands, the war was over. No, we didn't even need to do that. In fact, they were offering to surrender before the U.S. got to the Japan home islands. I would submit that the war was over after Midway. I mean, it kind of hurts me to say it, because I'm very proud of my grandfather and his service with the Marines in the South Pacific, but there was absolutely no reason to take any of those islands. They could have just left them there to rot. But, Clown World has no reverse gear. Well, yes, that's quite obvious. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were basically a giant PR stunt. I believe so. I think that it's pretty obvious in retrospect that it was just a PR stunt. The only question is, was it a PR stunt that involved a successful demonstration of a deadly new technology, or was it one of the biggest con jobs in history? At least in the U.S., what's the likelihood of rebellion, desertion if things pop off? Pretty slim. The soldiers who would have been most likely to reject their orders and refuse to go and die for Israel or whatever the slogan is going to be, they've already left. There's a few of them here tonight. You know, they're the ones who refuse to get vaccinated. So if you've got soldiers who will blindly obey and get themselves unnecessarily vaccinated with a unknown substance, the chance that they're not going to accept their orders to get deployed to somewhere in the Middle East is remote to non-existent. If the trustworthiness of Oppenheimer's face is you really should read Miles Mathis on the Oppenheimer movie. It's devastating. Is that a black turtleneck? When did the Dark Lord assassinate? Who did the Dark Lord assassinate? Hey, you know, I don't want to frighten you, but like, let's not remember. Don't mess with the jingle fucking pom-poms. So, we're just making a point here. We're making a point about the book thieves. So, well, on that note, it looks like my batteries run out somehow. So, we're going to go ahead and call it for the night. But thanks very much for tuning in. Pray for peace in the Middle East. And to the terrorists in Idaho, there will be no negotiation. Bring the books back. Remorse, repentance, compensation. You know what to do. I'm Vox Day, and this is the Darkstream.